Welcome to Show Studio. It's London Fashion Week, and we're going to be talking about the Erdem show and also a series of topics that I think relate to lots of different designers in London at the moment. One in particular is store openings and sort of the importance of the physical space within fashion retail, which seems very pertinent. Last night we had the Simone Rocha store opening. She had a little party there, and over the last year or so we've seen Christopher Kane, Roxander, lots of different designers open up. We'll also talk about the direction of the women's luxury market, which I think is particularly pertinent with a designer like Erdem, who's so known for sort of his dresses and beautiful cocktail wear. But before we kind of dive into our discussions, I'll let my great set of panellists from all across different aspects of the industry introduce themselves, starting here.
Hi, I'm Rosie Wallin. I'm a lecturer and a researcher at St Martin's.
Hello, I'm Caren Downie. I'm the brand director for Finery, which is a new online brand.
Morning, my name's Thawley. I'm the editor-in-chief of A Magazine, curated by, based in Paris.
And I'm John Michael O'Sullivan. I'm an architect and writer.
So serious. Also, your jacket's amazing. I just noticed it when you were introducing yourself.
You can stroke me.
Yeah, it's really nice. Really, I agree with you.
Funnily, on point, I'm going to a store opening tonight, so
nice.
that's why I'm a little bit dressed up.
Let's talk about stores, because it's really interesting, I think, and it's great to have your expertise on this, because I think it's really interesting. We all talk so much about innovation and how fashion's kind of, all about forward thinking, but I think when it comes to retail, particularly luxury retail, there is this kind of conservatism that for a designer to really sort of have made it, they need to put their name above a kind of physical space, and that's still something really important. And so many of the young brands have done that. If you walk down Mount Street, you've got Christopher Kane, you've got Roxander, you've got Nicholas Kirkwood, you've now got Simone Rocha. Erdem's opening a store on South Audley Street. Is the physical space still relevant to fashion? Big question. Someone has to go
I think
first.
absolutely it is.
So
actually, coming from the online space, we have no stores. I think that it's always very hard to get your personality across and everything that you stand for. And I think particularly with some of the high-end designers, you can never actually understand all the intricacy that goes into the product unless you can actually touch it and feel it. So I think it's really important. And going into Erdem's store, I think it feels very welcoming. It's very like the brand personality. You feel it's luxurious, it's comfortable, and you just feel quite at home there, and you can understand very much what he actually stands for. So I think it is very important.
It's a way of kind of cementing identity.
Yeah, definitely.
I think also for every designer, it's a dream, I think, to have a store. True. They all fantasize about it, I think, because it's like, it's their world. And a fashion show is an amazing thing, but it's temporal, it's only for a few moments, and a bit like a gig or something. And certainly for people like Galliano, who was the first one to sort of make it very theatrical, and then McQueen, it was almost like this performance, and then the clothing, it got blurred between costume and fashion in a way, because you bought a piece of McQueen and it was almost like being part of this show. So I think it's sort of a little bit in that realm, but also it's just this idea of having this mystique, removing the whiff of commerce a bit and having a world, or even, Tom Ford having his film that he made. It was almost like a big world for his garments to exist within,
It's interesting, isn't it, talking about that notion of a world, because I think stores have become even more removed from commerce as e-commerce has become more important. Like stores, they're almost like, it's interesting, given
museums,
the exactly. It's so curated, and there's often like Simone's store is full of kind of like the artworks that inspire her collections, and I think that landscape has really changed.
It's shifted because obviously you're going to sell more online than you can ever sell from one little store in London,
But I think unfortunately digital retail has become, and always has been, a very sterile space, and every single brand is stripped back to a cut-out image of each garment, and there is absolutely no context given to the consumer. And so I think what these stores are doing is allowing you to enter into that universe, absolutely. But what I think is particularly interesting about what's happening on Mount Street is the particular push towards a really powerful aesthetic impact that each of these designers are doing. Delphina Delatraz, for example, who opened up earlier in the year, she has these amazing malachite painted walls in her space. Simone, as Lou was saying, has her space filled with sort of Louise Bourgeois style cages and honeycomb installations of
so they are sort of
artwork
exhibition
and these
spaces,
incredible
more than shops,
value-adding environments for their clothes, which fascinate people, and also the people that are less in tune to what those designers are inspired of than we are. Because we perhaps are very aware of where they're looking and what they're being inspired by, but others, and particularly the people that want to shop in that area, will be intrigued.
But do you not also think it's actually about the experience for the customer?
Absolutely.
Which again, as you say, it's not what you can get online anymore.
Absolutely.
You have to go and have that physical experience.
I think it's a little bit what we had a DKNY panel last week, and we were kind of talking about the opposite extreme, which was how social media is so vital, and it is that world thing. I think you're saying that it's every aspect. I mean, the most important thing about physical space is if it wasn't there, I wouldn't have a job, so it's clearly vital for me. But it is amazing how, even though digital has taken over everything, that physical experience has become, if anything, more important. And as designers, I think we all constantly sit back and look at what we're doing and going, really, are we still doing shops? But it's kind of there and it's relevant. And I suppose the funny thing is, if you go back through time, there hasn't been digital, but people have always shopped through catalogues. They've always shopped through, right back into Victorian times, the Army and Navy stores were dispatching stuff to the colonies in India. And it was always about a flagship store or a brand that everybody knew, but actually most people would never visit. So I think it's all about creating that and then disseminating that visual thing.
And there's a huge dilution at the moment as well of so many brands, and luckily and happily being represented by many department stores all around the world and multi-brand stores, but they find themselves either lumped into a particular section with other young designers or hidden in a corner next to much bigger brands, having their representation of their collection dictated by what that department store believes is what consumers want. They might find themselves just looking like a dress brand or just looking like a coat and denim brand, when actually they prefer to be fully represented across the board, and that gives them that chance, and it also gives their customer that chance to actually buy the pieces that they really want from the season. It also gives them that chance to have the rapport with a client base where they can, actually essentially buy pieces and have those special pieces for the people that really want them, and become that sort of a destination hub.
Do we need to be being more innovative online though? Because it seems like everyone is agreeing, that the online space is very sterile and quite uniform across different brands, but rather than kind of, focusing so much on always needing a physical space, do we need to see more kind of attempts to kind of replicate that physical intimacy online?
But there's lots of work going on about that at the moment. There's lots of people researching kind of luxury in the digital sphere and how to kind of replicate that online, and so I think it's going to shift. It's just at the moment it's still relatively new, and certainly the luxury brands have only really recently started venturing into the online space, so there've been a few mistakes.
I thought it was really interesting when Chanel, who've been very conservative about online retail, when they did that capsule jewellery thing with Net-a-Porter, which was kind of their real first foray into online retail, and they the way they kind of the digital innovation they used is they built a digital shop. So it's like they just tried to make it as physical as possible, which I thought was quite interesting. What kind of innovation?
I think it's quite interesting how people do engage with that. So I mean, when we were actually researching how we wanted finery to look, and how we wanted to represent it online, we were very sure that we wanted to do something that didn't look sterile and didn't look the same as everything else, and so all of the product shots are much more in the editorial sphere than they are
and you find
as
people engage well with it?
I've been really surprised how actually the level of engagement that we have had from customers who send us all sorts of emails about, oh, it looks amazing, and obviously the packaging and all of that hold as much as you can make of an experience, even though it's online, I think the better, and to stand out and be something that's a little bit different.
I mean, the bit that I'm really excited to see what will happen is the interactive bit. How, so the consumer or the user or whatever is not just there to passively buy, but they're engaging in something, and there's some sort of conversation between the brand and the person on the other end, and I think that's what will replicate this experience idea that you have with the store.
I think it is going to push more in the other direction as well, because stores are very much not about shopping now. I think retailers are very much thinking about what can we do that isn't retail? Retail is one of the things I think about in selling, but actually it's way down there beyond storytelling and talking about the brand and bringing in things that are almost nothing to do with the brand, like you said about Simone Rocha. I think the fascinating thing with Mount Street is how different all those shops are. Only any of them really have cracked the answer. Christopher Kane feels like a website. It's all kind of seamless and white. Roxanda is incredibly
he
physical.
worked with John Pawson, didn't he? And that was the other thing that I was thinking was interesting to talk about in terms of branding, is how they're often teaming up with these star architects.
Yeah.
And it's sort of almost like, who are they going to choose? And what does that say about them as well?
Erdem's partner Philip designed his space, and I think that the intimacy of that really shows, because it feels like a home. There's a beautiful tiled floor, the hand-done windows, plants, portraits, something like incredibly
very personal.
Whereas,
homey,
it does. It feels very, very welcoming, doesn't it? And very just.
I mean, tonight I have to plug it. I'm going to Hussein Shalayin's opening,
thought it would have been.
and that's really exciting to see as well, because again, it's sort of because he's used objects quite a lot in his fashion show, so it's going to be really interesting to see how he's done that too in the space.
I'm interested that no one's really making use of kind of film or anything like that in the physical space. I think there's still a lot of innovation that could happen within shop environments. I think it has been interesting, people using windows in really, really innovative ways, but I think it's interesting what you said about Christopher Kane feeling like a website is a lot of the
I
stores.
didn't say that, sorry Christopher. I didn't say that.
But I think it's interesting, I was thinking about it a lot with Mount Street, because I think the footfall on Mount Street is actually pretty tiny, like when you walk down it. So I wonder if that's also added to brands feeling like they have to do something super, super kind of almost museum-like, because it's like they have to tell, it's not like they're just trying to grab people off the street, they need to make people almost want to entirely make that journey to go there. So it's, I think that's an interesting pressure. Like something like Bond Street doesn't have that.
No, Mount Street is definitely a destination, isn't it? That you have to say, I'm going to go to look at the new Erdem shop.
Exactly.
And it's also a destination that's changed a lot, because it used to be much more of a heritage area. It used to have, I mean, there's still Mount Street printers, but it used to be a lot more of the established classical galleries and antiques and that sort of thing. So I think that the consumer and the awareness still keeps changing, and with all of these openings, it will continue to mount. It's early. So there is change underfoot.
But it's an expensive thing to do to open a shop,
Hugely expensive.
That area is insane.
Yeah, and so there's also an element of financial backing. Roxanda had to have the backing to be able to open a shop like that. So, all of them.
Is it sustainable though? Because it's weird. Sometimes like you go and you stand in the store, even for just like 20 minutes or something, and no one else comes in, no one tries anything on, and I do find that worrying. Where you think, particularly with the younger London designers who are opening stuff up in there, you think, is this going to make any money?
Well, that's why they have to be innovative, don't they? I mean, they've got to have events. I think they've got to start using the shops, as we were saying, more as an event space rather than.
It's also the kind of place where customers will come in and spend enormous amounts of money, more than they would in other parts of town. Though it's the kind of place where someone will take 2 dresses, a coat, a pair of shoes, and a handbag in one go. I mean, I think that a lot of those places, just as many multi-brands do that are not online based, do rely on those customer bases and those real relationships.
But also, I imagine if you're a real fan, and you know that you want to purchase quite a few pieces from that particular designer, you would much rather go to their own store than go to a Selfridges.
I remember when the Margiela shop first opened, and it was so exciting. We all wanted to go there. So.
Who's getting retail really right, physical retail? Everyone always talks about Dover Street all the time, and it's interesting, they're kind of on the move. But who's really leading the way?
Yeah, but Dover Street is right in certain ways and not in others, because Dover Street covers an enormous ground now. It's you can go in there and buy a t-shirt and a perfume, or you can go in and buy a £5,000 coat. So I feel like it's
lots of people. It's very
it's more
different to one.
I mean, it's a market.
designer.
It feels like a market. It doesn't feel luxurious and small and inclusive and that sort of thing. You feel like you're walking into this enormous sort of enormous fashion playground, I suppose. But other places are much.
You're based in Paris. Would you say the retail environment in Paris is quite different to in London?
We don't have. I think Paris is so much based on the luxury houses. Multi-brand retail is very, very limited. in Paris. You have Leclerc, who have somewhat of a monopoly on that. I think they have several stores. There have been other attempts for smaller ones to come up, but young designers that have their own flagship stores in Paris are often sort of international ones with backing that need that sort of the kudos and the credit to have their Paris flagship. Perhaps they're Chinese, perhaps they're Korean, but I don't think that we have the same sort of support and all those young designers coming up at all, like what is happening here in the last perhaps 5 years.
That's interesting.
And I think Dover Street is still, even though it's been around for a while, it kind of still is the benchmark. If you go back through, again, sort of the Bibas, there's always been, every generation, there's a store that kind of changes everything. And I think Dover Street came along and changed that for everybody and made a lot of retailers very uncertain. And
but there hasn't been anyone since.
Well, yeah,
really.
but, you know,
Yeah.
I'm working on it. What's interesting, I think, is what Dover Street did was obviously it made that very, as you were saying about the McQueen thing, that theatre, that kind of almost that feeling that a shop was a performance and would change and would evolve. And you now have places like Story in New York, places like the Pool in Tokyo, which literally rebrand and reinvent themselves either every month or every season.
But Colette did come before Dover Street, let me just say. That's one thing that Paris does have.
Yeah. But do you not think Colette, I think Colette has changed a lot post Dover Street. Do you not think?
In what way?
Just I think some of the influence of Dover Street, you feel it in Colette a bit more. I think the kind of pace of Colette's a bit different.
I think Dover Street has influenced all retailers to some extent.
I'm quite surprised actually at the very slow speed with which a lot of the large retailers seem to be taking any of this on board. It does seem very, very slow.
I think, again, you're saying large retailers, it does take a long time for things to come through, and there is a lot of, I think, nervousness as well, because a lot of the things that seem to be kind of really exciting can also seem to be quite gimmicky. So
well, it depends who the market is, doesn't it? You know, if you're selling to a very similar market sector to Dover Street, then it makes sense. But if you're not, then why would you? You know, you've got to sort of serve the people that you're.
Yeah, but I think that that's true to a certain extent. But I think right across the age groups, it's changed. The retail environment has changed, or the marketplace has changed so much that I would have thought that a lot of the big retailers would have done more to make an experience of their stores than they actually have.
I think the really big ones are, the people like Selfridges that I think treat it more like a civic space. It's part of the city, and that happens to have a lot of retail in it. I think the smaller ones, you're right, there isn't really someone perhaps acting as a model, because I think those small stores, going back to Main Street again, it's almost like dressmakers again. You're going back to very intimate relationship, and it is kind of, again, it's a very divided relationship between that and this online kind of free form.
I think people are missing that intimacy.
Me too.
You know, I think
but you say that, but then you walk around a Harrods or something like that, and you're like no one here is looking for an experience. People are just like, but it's fascinating. I love going to Harrods right near here, and you can go in there, and it's literally like absolutely amazing, and like no one's won over by like a quirky like mannequin or something. People don't give a shit. They're just like buying stuff, and I think there are so many different ways of doing retail now. Like you walk down Main Street, and I do think the experience is so important, and you see people being really intrigued by like an installation or what have you, but then it is such a different environment to something like a Selfridges or a Harrods.
But that's not the only thing. I don't think it's just visual. I think it's very much personal, and I think it's about the relationships you have with the store manager. I think it's about that text message you receive when the new season comes in, or that pair of shoes you were waiting for. I think it's the idea that you can go back in and say, my shoes need fixing, or there's something that needs to be worked on, or I have this special event, my size, and like, is there you can call up, and all those kind of things, or if you can just
personal
have a
service.
glass of champagne or a cup of tea or anything like that. Those things are still.
But do you not think, ironically, that is something that online, I think, is doing actually maybe better than the physical space? Like, because online,
Net-a-Porter's never offered you a glass of
champagne. That would be an innovation. That would be an innovation.
The speed with which they'll pick things up or return something.
Well, they have those great chat services and that sort of thing.
Or you'll order something and then they'll call you and be like, we're going to send it to you like today, straight away, quickly. I think that's quite interesting. Whereas
Well, I think there's room for some strategy here, like how the online store. Obviously, there's how you link these different things together. Is nobody's doing that in a really slick way, I don't think yet. I think it's all a little bit disjointed, and there's room for improvement. Yeah, that's the teacher in me.
Yeah. Let's move on, just as we wait for the show to start, let's move on to talk about the kind of the direction of the women's luxury market, because I think it's really interesting, and it kind of ties to the third topic here. Is, you look at that set of designers, I always put Erdem in that box. I think kind of because they're all mates and you see them together a lot, but with Christopher Kane, Roxander, and you think a lot of them, their real forte is kind of occasion wear, it's cocktail wear, it's dresses. And then you look at the kind of new establishment, to use a big fashion cliche, like people like Marcus Almeida who are coming out, where it's so day wear, it's almost like day wear to the point of being kind of like, incredibly grungy and very, very different. And I wonder how the luxury market is changing in that respect, and whether that, that focus on dresses, which is so prominent at London Fashion Week, whether that is something that is kind of sustainable or particularly forward-thinking, or is that just the reality of what women want?
It's totally connected to the fairy tale, which has been there forever, isn't it? Of the celebrity now wearing the dress on the red carpet, and then, that whole dynamic, and I think this shift to day wear is about maybe that coming to an end, hopefully, because it's been going on forever, hasn't it? Maybe there are other ways to sell luxury that don't rely on celebrity quite so much.
Do you think it is tied to celebrity culture? Is that?
I think so. Yes,
I think it's lifestyle as well of those particular brands. I mean, you do, when you're on Man Street, people are in those shops looking for winter wedding garb, and the conversations are about very specific things, and it is that kind of social, so maybe not celebrity, but certainly that social
strata
group, and it doesn't feel forward. You're right; it feels very much today. And so I think the interesting thing is how designers like Erdem and that group, as you're saying, keep up or adapt to what definitely feels like the future, which is this kind of.
But I think, don't you think that one of the things that the internet has allowed people to do is to actually become much more informed about fashion generally. So I think they are now much more informed than they've ever been before, and I think that means that they're starting to understand luxury in a different way. So that's why people like Marcus Almeida have made such a success in such a short time, because it's, you want to buy that piece that you think you can wear every day, every week.
And I think that is something that these designers, I think it's interesting, I feel like we're picking on Christopher Kane, but when you go into the Christopher Kane store, I think, he's been very successful with sweatshirts in certain respects, but you don't really go there for kind of the stuff that you wear all the time, whereas a lot of these brands, I think that's why we talk a lot in these panels about contemporary and why that kind of price point is doing so well, and things like Acne, and I think a lot of it is just practicality. You can go in there and get clothes that you can actually wear, whereas I wouldn't think to go to someone like Erdem for, like a really cool sweater and some tailored trousers.
Well, I think there's a feminist element to it too. If you think about where all this began, women were there to just be pretty things at parties, and now perhaps we do other things too.
Sometimes.
So, I don't know. Yeah, I think I do other things too. I'm not sure you do.
I think in both of Erdem and Christopher's defence, I think Erdem's also developing other categories very fast in his own collection. I think he's been doing beautiful tailored skirt suits and tweed and these beautiful coats that he showed last winter.
And some lovely knitwear, actually.
So I think that...
But it's, it totally makes sense to me, because it's a way to have instant impact. If you make a fabulous dress and somebody wears it at a fabulous event that a photograph is taken, it's instant. It's
I think the thing to remember, though, is that where they've all come from is very, very small businesses, and when you are a small business, you have to focus on the one thing that's going to give you impact. And I think that's a lot of the reason why they've focused, as you say, it gives you immediate standouts.
I think it's difficult though in a way, because I think also I love that the divide between fashion day wear and actual day wear, because when you're at a show and everyone leaves me like, I love the day wear, and you're like, it was not day wear, slightly.
That was orange corduroy flares.
That often it's still dresses, and I think that's quite interesting. It's I think that's what some of the really kind of emerging brands are so good at doing, is making clothes that people actually wear on the street, which is why the denim thing was so interesting, because fashion has just failed to make use of denim as a category for so long. Designer jeans is such a kind of cringe notion. Everyone gets their jeans from denim brands, and then wears them with fashion. I think that's the kind of day wear that I'm talking about these brands making use of, like, you know, really, really great pieces that you're going to wear all the time. And I wonder how much that'll help grow their businesses.
I think Loewe started with a pretty good base of day wear, I have to say.
That's interesting.
As an example.
Yeah.
All the knitwear, the cuffed jeans, shearling, all those kind of things. I think it's very...
Shearling.
A favourite of the day.
I think it's quite amusing though, because we still always have the debate in the office about, is it day wear, is it evening wear, and what we think is actually day wear sometimes most people would think it's evening.
Yeah. But I think about this also, it's sometimes funny, like Charlie, I think it was Charlie Porter wrote a really good thing. It was about menswear, but it was about you know, if we the fashion pack aren't buying it, then like who is? Because you sit at these shows and everyone is wearing, maybe it's Alex Fury, one of the two of them, and they were like, everyone at the shows is wearing like a t-shirt and jeans. And I found it quite funny this women's wear season being at the shows is everyone is wearing ripped jeans and like a really cool pair of shoes, but ripped jeans and then like a sweater or a t-shirt.
And staring at dresses.
Yeah, and then you're like,
and there's a disconnect.
Yeah, because you're like, if these are meant to be like the most fashionable women in the world who care more about these kind of clothes and have the occasion to wear them. And I'm like, if we're not, who is? And I know there's always going to be that very small section of the market that does go to these fabulous events, you know, that kind of shopper that will buy those couture dresses, etc. But I was like, are we missing out this huge range of women who do have big incomes and who want to buy fashion, but don't want to wear that orange?
But it's not as pressworthy, and I think that's the key, isn't it? That, you know, no matter how fabulous the suit has been tailored, or the sweatshirt and jeans, how cool they are, they're not going to be as pressworthy as a beautiful dress. So I'm sure that's why.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I just think it's strange in London, because I think London, more than Paris, is like dress city. And we always talk about London like it's the home of creativity and, like, you know...
It is.
It is, but then I think it is very conservative in how it presents women and women's wear, which is interesting.
It's a little bit like men in the suits though, still, isn't it? It's that comfort zone of, because those things just are so iconic, the frock and the suit, that they just won't go away for some reason.
But do you not think at LCM, I like, it doesn't feel like it's presenting a kind of conservative image of a man?
I think LCM as a showcase is definitely, and even since it started, it's changed so much. The whole balance of that. Savile Row's definitely kind of, you know, moved out. But in terms of menswear as a whole in London, I think there's still an amazing amount of that conservatism to it. So the man in a shirt and trousers. But, it's easier. So yeah, I'm fascinated by it, and I think it's kind of everything you were saying. It's also where these designers have come up. I think Erdem and all of that Jonathan Saunders generation but kind of came up with a very kind of uptown feeling, kind of borrowing a New York term. Whereas when you started going to Fashionista a few years ago and seeing people like Claire Barrow and Ryan Lowe really kind of just not throwing things together, doing amazing things, but in a really sort of improvised way that didn't seem about, you know, aspiring to that kind of seemed to be almost...
Yeah, where's the rebellion? That's the thing. Yeah. I mean, even if you think back to kind of Vivienne Westwood back in the day, it was rebellious, wasn't it? And so, I don't know, I missed that a bit.
But it's quite interesting to think a bit on a bigger scope that it's also 10 years of Alexander Wang, for example, and Riccardo Tisci this year. So they're also people that have sort of spiked a much more streetwear and casual trend in high fashion. So I think they're also, I mean, Alex just opened his store in the same area as well on Friday. So there's also that side to consider, that not only perhaps some of the London designers have followed quite closely in the footsteps of the generation before, but that at the same time, in that same time space, people have tried to push the conversation towards other music styles and other sort of markets that are perhaps less connected to fashion and more connected to other elements of culture.
It's strange that that's missing in a way from this generation of London designers, and I don't mean it as a criticism of them, but it's interesting, you know, I would never equate, you know, Erdem or Christopher Kane or someone like Roxana with, you know, London style heritage or counterculture or club culture or subculture at all, you know, it's very...
grown up.
Yeah, it is, and it's very kind of...
But that's a part of UK culture as well.
But it's
Huge
also,
plus.
but it's
Yeah.
also,
Plus.
but it's also part of the business. Fashion is even more than it ever was. It's a business.
But I think, and I think that's probably why, because where it evolved from, when you think about the generation before Erdem and Christopher and Jonathan, actually it was quite rebellious. And although it was like
very rebellious at the beginning,
completely, and it was very much about. London was creative, but actually we couldn't produce anything of quality, and so there was a huge backlash of criticism, wasn't there? And I think that's why this wave of designers has gone down the luxury route more.
And then when I was a fashion student, it felt like Paris was the rebellious place, you know, because you had all these, there was the Margiela shows, which were amazing, the Belgians,
I think Paris feels more rebellious than London at the moment still, perhaps.
Well, I think when Eddie came back into the conversation, he kind of highlighted, I think, the fact that it had been very tasteful in Paris for a while. You had the Nina Ricci's and sort of that, you know, embrace of couture, definitely, sort of, and I think that Heidi has sort of thrown that out of kilter quite a bit, along with everybody else that's kind of come into it. So it feels like that's definitely moved quite substantially compared to here.
I think the show is starting.
It looks like it.
We know dresses and we all feel silly.
Yeah, we jeans.
But I think as well, Erdem's roots also go much further back to Milan as much as Paris as well, to Valentino, to Alberto Ferretti, to designers like that. The romance that is very present in what he does. I don't think we need to just root him to London's particularly. He's not English either.
No.
Yeah. I think I was really interested with what he did last season, you know, that kind of quite almost raw kind of breaking aesthetic that he was working with, you know, things looking like they were fraying, and it's interesting, like just from those.
Looked like Prada the season before as well.
Pardon?
It looked like Prada the season before.
Okay, someone's feeling sassy.
It's true. No, call a spade a spade. It was very beautiful, but there were similarities.
Yeah.
A lot of people have moved towards that sort of that inclusion of jacquards and paneling and everything.
Yeah.
It's just
True.
She has that effect.
Yeah, there's been a lot that's looked like Prada this season in particular. It's nice to see the bra tops given a new life at Jada Pinkett.
But also elements of Simone's middle section of her show with the bow shoulders and the candy pink. I mean, I thought that was beautiful. It was an amazing show, but there was parts of that also had echoes. And here's that cut-out shoulder that seems to be everywhere.
But it's interesting that he's continuing it into this, like that almost looks like she's been running around in a field, you know, at the bottom, like that.
Or dipped in ink.
Yeah.
But it's again the Victoriana.
It is very Victorian.
The dressing up box. It feels, I mean, he was very inspired by his mother, wasn't he? He always says that. And it feels a little bit like, you know, dressing up in your mother's fabulous clothes.
I think Erdem is very good at lingerie details as well. I love what he does with sort of, you know, silk-covered buttons and tiny eyelets and that sort of thing.
But I think that the details of his clothes are just amazing anyway, aren't they? That's the one thing I think about his product, is that everything has been considered.
He does keep more of a hand feel than other labels. Like, I mean, I think it feels a little bit more, somehow more precious than a Valentino dress sometimes. So there's more ready to wear because there's certainly something more manufactured about their lace and those kind of fabrics. I feel like it doesn't feel as machined.
No, you do feel that he's had a creative handle on everything, from the fabrics right the way through to all the finishes on the inside and everything.
It's interesting that you mentioned Valentino though, because I think this primness that a lot of people do put on Valentino is something they established. It just doesn't seem to be going away, and I think for a while it felt like it was kind of a trend, and now I wonder how much it has kind of like redefined how women could see them, how people see beauty really, because something like this, you know, you could argue that it's frumpy, but it feels very that kind of virginal aesthetic.
Ethereal.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be going away at all, does it? And
but it's sort of like the whimsical backlash to how much minimalism has sort of dominated since the Celine wave of the past decade, or less than a decade as well. This is almost like the main feminine alternative to wearing double-faced cashmere and you know, white shirts and silk trousers and that sort of thing. It's like,
But you can't imagine any of these women in a boardroom. You know, they're very much. They're very much. Whimsical
I
is the word.
don't know. I think you'd be quite surprised who would actually the woman that would wear this for an occasion. It's probably somebody. Actually, I know somebody who was sitting in a boardroom, and this Erdem is by far her favourite designer because actually
she gets to escape her suits
and feel beautiful.
Well, I thought it was interesting in the, I don't know if it was the Forces of Fashion, but the September issue of American Vogue shot Kendall Jenner in a pink tweed skirt suit of Erdem's, and I thought that was a nice, with a Miu Miu shoes or something like that, and put it in a very much more of a
Kendall Jenner.
Much more of
I'm actually weirdly obsessed with her. I don't know why. I'm like weirdly
you
obsessed.
are wearing a dog collar though.
I just think she's kind of amazing. I don't know why. I've also got really obsessed with Cressida Bonus as well. Like really weird like crisis. Well, I'm like genuinely like quite inspired by them. Like I like check out what they're up to.
So here we're looking at quite a beautiful coat and dress in matching jacquard.
It's interesting that there's no, it's all dresses. There's been not one kind of hint of anything that is, you know, tailored or anything like that, which I think that's quite intriguing that he's not trying to.
It's sort of reminding me, I mean, this sounds bad, but I mean it in a nice way. It's sort of almost reminding me a bit of Laura Ashley from the 70s as well. It's got that feeling.
But I think there's been quite a lot of that. Like I thought that Simone, some of her prints felt quite new and they were kind of quite awkward and you know, they looked a bit vintage and quite almost like a little bit frumpy. I think there's been quite a lot of that. Like
it's definitely soft focus, isn't it?
Yeah.
Soft focus 70s, soft porn maybe. I don't know.
This feels a bit choked though or something. I don't know. There's lovely. You can see lovely sort of patterns and fabrics and stuff, but it's both kind of quite languid and melancholy, and also just a lot of stuff going on.
All these puff sleeves and
I think the ones where it's
high collars,
where there's a bit of a release of skin, feels a bit more kind of sensual.
Well, he's good at that when it's a bit undone and like the side. Well,
that's why last season was so beautiful because
and the spring before.
It was so great.
That was my favourite. The spring before was amazing.
It was gorgeous.
But he's also done no set this season, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Because last season was so much about
about theatre.
Little living rooms and bedrooms and lamps and curtains and all that set.
But maybe that, I think also you have to think, you know, he was building last season in the context of about to be being open a store, so you probably would be thinking a lot more about like physical space.
Now it's product.
Now it's like things to put in. Just as a personal thing, I hate fashion shows where they make the models walk up and down stairs because you know you can't enjoy the show.
Always does that.
Stressed.
Always does it. And it's,
in New York, so many girls fell over.
I know. I saw in the stream.
Devastating.
It was not good.
It reminded me of when the boys fell off the Raf Simons thing last.
Yeah, that was not good. Raf Simons, that was like
health and safety.
Elevated.
It was an actual drop.
Yeah, it's just an actual drop. They had their faces covered and were walking on a raised platform, and one of them just walked up the end. It was not good.
So after everything I said about tailoring, and he just showed dresses.
Yeah, so
we knew it wasn't true. Yeah, it's definitely, there's an escapism about it, isn't there? It's escaping from the modern world, escaping from, you know, women's lib.
It is interesting you say escaping from the modern world, because it is. This is like, it feels very removed from like, the realities and pragmatisms of like.
So it's something very picnic and hanging rock about what he
does. Maybe that's what they want.
Yeah.
Maybe they want to escape.
It's always very picnic and hanging rock.
Yeah. But then it is fashion as costume though, in a way, isn't it?
I think so, yeah.
But then maybe it is a contradiction to last season, because last season was a lot of flat, big, shorter dresses. It felt coat, it felt much more. I think it's really difficult being this kind of designer also doing a summer collection, because I think that you always do end up going a bit more towards like the flowy dresses.
He's moved away from a lot of those little Empire line sort of baby dolls that he's been doing recently, which is funny because there was a lot of that and I mean, obviously we can't see from the live stream, but we were seeing all that fil coupé jacquard and the feathers and all that sort of thing, which seems to, but that skirt perhaps is feathered, but it seems a lot more print based. And
I always think it is much harder for luxury designers to have a show for spring, because it's much harder to understand where the luxury is in the fabrics, because it's obviously all much lighter.
Well, that's where he's lucky, because he's so known for print. So I think if you weren't so print based, it would be even worse.
Yes.
It's interesting that you said it's kind of escapist and you know, anti-women's lib and stuff. Do you feel like sometimes I find it strange being it's always strange being at fashion shows anyway, because they're never the most kind of like progressive display of femininity, but it's strange
that was carefully worded.
Well, no, it's just, you know, when you're there and it's just like loads of really, really, really skinny white 15-year-olds and you're like, this is strange.
But it is strange. It's also quite conservative, and it hasn't really moved, and that's the thing that I think is quite interesting about fashion in general, is it thinks of itself as being really radical, but actually how radical is that?
I think that's what I kind of maybe I want to understand, is whether we look at this and we think that the women's luxury market is progressive in how it treats women, or whether it's
whether you're dressing up dolls or dressing people.
How do you work with sizes at Finery?
In terms of?
Is it a big size range for?
Yeah, we do 6 to 16.
Yeah, because that's another thing that the luxury market stops at 12 or 14 so often.
Yeah, and the sizes are also pretty small as well, like a 14 can be quite diddy, which is really strange when you think the average UK dress size is like a 14 or 16, isn't
so it's not aimed at the average woman.
No, it's not at all. But then, that's what I just find strange about it is fashion is meant to be so kind of radical and innovative and leading the way, and then it seems so out of step with kind of how women actually live their lives sometimes, which is maybe why the high street, I think, is doing really well, because it just feels more on the pulse of how women want to kind of live and be, which is it's just I think fashion can feel quite othered sometimes. Like I look at something like that and I love it and I think it's beautiful, but I don't see it as clothes for me or women I know. You see it as this kind of like
that's really true, isn't it?
But what about the other categories for people like these kind of designers? Do you think that like if we're talking about this London establishment, are customers only going to them for their runway dresses and things like that, or do you think that they're actually succeeding to develop their other categories like handbags and shoes and because it's very hard with all the minimums of those kind of things, and they become incredibly much more expensive than a Prada shoe or
I think Simone has been very successful at getting shoes and bags is something she's done from the word go.
She almost started with that, didn't she?
But I think that is kind of the problem, is you almost do have to kind of really start with it. Even some of the really, really big brands, they still do collaborations with their shoes. You know, it's not their own shoes. I think Christopher Kane's been successul with handbags.
Has it gone well? I know that it's been
very
publicised.
Very publicised. I think it's hard though, because I think we at the Fashion Pack underestimate how much people don't know the names, you know, and I think if you're going to spend that much money on a handbag, and I think if my mum was buying a handbag, she wouldn't buy a Christopher Kane handbag, she'd buy like a Prada handbag or something, you know, and you always, I think
that's so true. And also I think the other thing that's really difficult is for a lot of these kind of smaller designers, to put them in that kind of bracket, is that they get put into categories by the buyers that actually buy the products for the department stores, and it's very difficult for them to break out of that, because they're just seen
and that's another reason for having a store,
exactly.
Because you know, imagine if you're put next to someone that you really don't relate to, and then the product doesn't sell, and then, you know, they don't take you perhaps, or don't take as much the following season, and it's as much to do with how it's merchandised as it is
but also the selection. So say you get known for, I don't know, knitwear and t-shirts, and that's all the buyers want to buy, with maybe 2 bottoms, but they don't try anything else because they want it to be safe, because at the moment it's just all about driving sales, so people aren't brave enough actually to experiment, or even if they themselves see something and go, oh my god, I absolutely love that. And 9 times out of 10, I'm sure you go and do personal orders for, and most of the time the stuff I select, oh sorry, no, we're not producing that, which is really annoying.
Yeah, it happens all the time. But then you think it happens from the dresses right down to that.
Everything.
Like they're always going to be known as the denim people now, even though that's a small aspect of what they do.
And when you're that creative as well, that's really hard. It's hard for you to develop your business and to move it on from there. It's quite frustrating.
Then a lot of the really young brands are trying to do their own e-commerce, which I think is interesting because I think, this generation again of designers, I think perhaps stayed away from the online. Christopher King's a really good example of that.
Erdem's been selling online for a while though.
Yeah, but Erdem was more kind of, more towards that. But people like Marcus Armani and Claire Barry have really kind of taken ownership of their online space and their online community, and that's quite interesting because I wonder if that will give them a chance to kind of put pieces out there that can't find a home elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's been for Marcus Almeida, it's been really productive, hasn't it, in terms of they've been able to do that, and B, they actually also have done little events and things as well, haven't they? So like pop-up one night only or whatever it might be, which also drives then to their website.
Which is clever, and it's what we were talking about before about creating links between the online and the physical store.
Why are they, for everyone concerned, so representative in London of the next generation? I feel like there's a lot of others that are being...
Who else do you think?
Like, I think Thomas Tate is another very relevant one, also a LVMH prize winner. Like, are there others that you think,
I think because
form
Thomas,
the new guard? I feel like we've just focused on...
Yeah, I agree. But I think because Marcus Almeida is much more based in almost like sitting above the high street and contemporary.
It is very
but Thomas is luxury.
Thomas is real luxury.
Thomas is really...
He's amazing, but his real luxury.
Like Marcus Armani, like their clothes are not expensive, like in the same way that a denim like tunic is like £200 or something, so it is expensive, but it's not.
Are there others that are doing that medium range?
I think on the menswear, a lot of them are trying it. A lot of them kind of deliberately lowered their prices, and obviously menswear's cheaper anyway, and kind of put themselves in. Like Aggie and Sam kind of did a thing where they kind of lowered everything a little bit.
But where is the line? What makes something luxury?
Yeah,
that's the question.
That's a very good question.
I just thought I'd cut to the chase. What makes them luxury, and where is the line?
But I don't know if Marcus Armani, I don't know if they would even talk about themselves as a luxury brand.
Because Erdem definitely would.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to see.
But the proof is in the pudding also with Erdem when you touch it and you.
So it's in the craftsmanship,
I don't know,
it's in the quality of the make.
And the quality of everything, the fabrics, isn't it? Everything, really.
Have you ever worn Erdem?
No.
You?
Not my style, really, even though I can appreciate it.
I think it's really beautiful.
It is.
But no, it's not my style, I don't think. Which is maybe why someone like Simone Rocha I find quite interesting, because she taps into a lot of this kind of same aesthetic. Like Simone is kind of quite girly, but I wear Simone all the time. But it's quite perverse, which I really like. Whereas Erdem, there's a kind of a humour and an awareness and a reverence to wearing Simone, and you feel like, yes, I'm wearing like a kind of pom-pommy dress or like a frilly dress, but there's always that sense that you're not kind of dressed up and just looking pretty.
Oh, you're being ironic.
I think it's the irony, I think you're right in
saying. There's a slight sense of like being in control.
But I think Erdem has some of that as well, to be honest. I think he has a real film noir kind of sensibility and something very boudoir about what he does too, that's not necessarily just frothiness and meringue.
No, completely.
But it is. It's I think that also
maybe
when you look at his mood boards and
David
things.
Lynch film or something.
Well, that's what the last set look felt like in a way, like taking fans and.
Actually, that was really, really cool. I liked that because it felt a little bit more.
There's something kind of dark and gothic about Erdem at times, which I like.
I'd probably prefer that aspect because
It is very clearly luxury, I think, as you were saying. So that makes it quite straightforward. He is going to sit with those luxury players. That's where the new wave, whoever you alight on, it's where their customer actually comes from, because we know who Erdem's customer currently is. We know who's going to go into the shop in Mount Street, and as you're saying, Simone Rocha, you can start to feel who that customer is going to be, which is a much more kind of open one. But where is London's next establishment going to? Is it going to be getting into that between high street and luxury zone? Is it going to be looking into where Erdem is, or are we sort of feeling that that's not an area that's going to progress?
I think you have to think about also where they're selling to. I do think you can't really even compare Marcus Armani and Erdem in some ways, even though we have been doing, because Marcus Armani is for young women. It is very, very young.
This feels like mothers and daughters could wear it, and he's trying to sort of get both markets at the same time, but and that's why it's clever, because you could have an older woman wear it, and you could also have Alexa Chung wear it in a different way.
I don't think those designers think so much about different ages anymore, that whole mother-daughter thing. I think they think more about different cultures, and I think when you look at this, you can see women who dress in a more kind of like skin exposed way wearing it, and then you can imagine women from different cultures, different areas who have to be more covered up or would like to be more covered up. And I think
I agree.
Actually, a lot of those designers are really smart. I think Roxana is incredibly good at doing that. Mary is as well, and it's that kind of global approach.
But can we talk about this dropped sleeve, this situation, because it really is like everywhere.
It's really flattering though.
Did I miss who did this first in the last season or two? And
Valentino have done it for quite a long time.
Yeah. Do you think it's that sort of?
I think it's that.
It's just really across the board.
Who else
everywhere.
did it?
New York was full of this as well.
Well, it's flattering.
Whether it was cut out.
It's really flattering. Like women hate the top of their arm.
There's no bingo wing, but you still get a little bit of cheeky flesh.
Yeah.
And most women like their shoulders.
Yeah. Shoulders are okay.
It's a safe body area.
It just like straps you in there.
But they're not for broad shoulders either. You'd have to have, I don't know.
I don't know.
No? I think
I mean, it's true. I've never met a woman who hates their shoulders.
Yeah, shoulders, they're just kind of there.
They're a very safe area.
It's a frame. It's a frame. It's the coat hanger.
Yeah.
There you go.
So do we like what we've seen? It's not actually what I was expecting. I didn't think it would be so long and so kind of evening weary. But are we... It's hard not to like Erdem. Like, it's always very pretty. Like, it's always very beautiful.
Yeah, it's very pretty.
I would have liked to see a few more shorter dresses from him. I quite like when he does Baby Doll and like this kind of Principessa little very...
I would have liked to see a trouser.
Yeah, also.
Just one.
Because he's good at them. Because he's good at them.
Yeah, he is good at them. Yeah. That's kind of why you think it's a shame not to see more tailoring, because it's like it's something that he could do really, really well.
I'd love to see the shoes up close because they look like quite interesting.
They look
really
really
quite work
sweet.
it out.
Yeah,
I think
but they all look like they need to be saved by a knight in shining armour a little bit, and
and like no sharp edges, that's easy for them to pick up.
They can just side saddle onto the horse.
I quite like the graphic sort of punch of that striped dress.
Yeah,
with
I really
the
like
alternating.
that.
I think that breaks.
That's really cool.
Breaks the show up
I'd
a
really
little
like
bit.
him to do something where he like hacked off one of those dresses and put it with something really unexpected. You know, if he did like a really, really great pair of kind of like distressed up trousers or something, and you saw that, I think that would be really great because it would show different ways that you could wear this. But
I mean, I think it would be interesting for him because all the way through I was sort of thinking about Dries a little bit, because Dries van Noten was obviously is the other one who was very driven by fabric.
Yeah.
And his business model is really interesting as well, because he's never had the store in London. He's got a store in Antwerp, and he's never bothered, you know, with trying to sort of become part of the establishment, and somehow weirdly became.
But Dries, I think, is so eclectic in his offering. You know, when you see a Dries runway show, there is a lot of kind of garments and wearable things. There's a lot of like trousers and shorts and skirts. And
but I think there's
a massive collection, though, isn't it? The Dries collection is massive, and I suppose when you have to focus it down as much as 40 looks or whatever.
But I just think
how you make it
as
look
a business model,
I
think it would be quite interesting to compare them, you know, how they're thinking, because they're both print based.
I'm sure if you went to look at the full collection, there will be trousers.
But Dries is very, very present in London at the same time. I mean, and I think he's done a good job of creating the corners in the department stores that actually do feel like his world, which is rare.
Would you say Dries is present in London? I do not feel like Dries is present in London.
I can name like 5 stores.
Yeah, I think you can get it, but I don't think it feels like in the same way. Like, I don't think it's a designer.
It's a little bit more underground.
More, like, if you want to go and get it, you can definitely get it.
I think London customers, like you said, are the kind of shoppers that, like you said, will just wear their jeans and then like, you know, this season's Prada shoe and then like a vintage jacket or like a Chanel handbag. That I think that the more mainstream like fashion-aware woman wants those statement pieces, and Dries is understated. Dries is kind of, it is a bit more insider perhaps.
Maybe, but still, because there is not a store in London, actually when you go to Paris, it's one of the places that you really want to go to, isn't it? Yeah,
the one in Antwerp's amazing. And talking about creating a world, he did that in his back garden, you know, kind of. And it's kind of interesting.
Almost feels like a boat, that shop.
Yeah.
Creaky stairs.
But yeah.
So what do we want to see next from Erdem, other than a few more trousers? What's next? I also think it's important to mention, you know, this is kind of, he's done 10 years, so I think also part of it, I think there is that, everyone's celebrating 10 years at the moment and it's kind of strange, but I think there's that process of and kind of establishing what he's about. No, loads of people are. Like it was.
It's true.
Yeah, it's really, really strange. But I think also maybe this is about him establishing exactly who he is and what he's known for. And he is known for, you know, outside of Valentino and perhaps in a way Simone, he's that guy that does these kind of prim, pretty, slightly kind of, slightly vintage look
historical
dresses. Yeah, exactly.
I think I would like to see him push it a bit, you know, into this, what you were calling noir, you know, that would be...
I see him do like a fetish collection.
Yeah, a little bit more edgy. Edgy, I hate that word. I can't believe I just said that.
Something a bit funky.
I think we should not just look at Next, but also perhaps all of us and everybody take a closer look at this show, because we've just given it a sweeping first look, but I think that there's a lot of beautiful fabrics, metallics, a lot of interesting things to explore in what he's done now, and we're not even going to see this in stores for 6 months, so I feel like maybe we should also go into the shop and see the fall collection and enjoy that as well. And
the fall collection is beautiful. I went into the store on Saturday.
I think that you know, there's coats that sort of collapse into different fabrics. I think there's a lot of things that he's done wonderfully.
And there's also kind of like dresses that have got knitted tops to them, so they almost look like two pieces, but they blend seamlessly into each other. They're just gorgeous.
But maybe that is why, going back to what we were saying, a winter collection is easier, because, you know, with these, you're in no doubt that the fabrication is absolutely beautiful and the construction is gorgeous, and you know that every detail from kind of, you know, the cuffs right through to everything is going to be brilliant. But there is more room for innovation in a winter collection, like those coats that kind of melted from, you know, they were really amazing, and it's much harder with a kind of like light dress to do something that's technically kind of awe-inspiring. So maybe it's kind of tricky.
But also tonight he's unveiling his green carpet collection with Livia Firth's Eco Age sustainable initiative, so I think that's really interesting. He's going to show 12 pieces at the Wallace collection tonight, and from what I understand, he's used this kind of eco yarn that's made from plastic bottles, recycled plastic, the one that Pharrell was using with G-Star collaboration, and Adidas have just made the trainers with them, and he's also using fabrics from archive collections to sort of pick up all that waste that designers leave behind. So I think that we should definitely check that out too.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. Everyone needs to work more sustainably, not just for pop-up collections. All the time.
True.
All the time.
All the time. Well, shall we give him a round of applause? Yeah, it was very beautiful.
It was very beautiful.